Birria tacos started life nowhere near a taco cart. Long before anyone dipped a tortilla in anything, birria was a slow braised goat or beef dish served at family gatherings in Jalisco. Built around dried chilies, simmered for hours until the meat fell apart. The taco version is a much newer invention, and the trick that made it explode is simple. The tortilla gets dragged through the pooled fat on top of the braising liquid before it ever touches the griddle. That fat is what turns the shell a deep rust color and gives it a fried crunch a normal taco never has. Diners get a small cup of the leftover broth on the side for dipping, and that pairing, a crimson taco next to a steaming cup of consomme, became one of the most photographed plates in food media. The dish traveled from home kitchens to street stalls to international menus almost entirely on the strength of that one image. Corn ribs were never a tradition anywhere. They were invented for a camera. Take an ear of corn, cut it lengthwise into quarters, and something happens that has nothing to do with flavor. Each strip curls backward as it cooks, arching until it resembles an actual rib bone. No chef set out to improve corn's taste this way. The shape itself is the entire reason the dish exists, since a curled, golden strip photographs completely differently than a flat cob ever could. Restaurants adopted it fast once the format proved itself online, usually seasoning the curled pieces with chili powder, lime, or cotija, and serving them as a shareable starter. It's one of the rare dishes built backward from a visual rather than forward from an ingredient. The Oklahoma onion burger exists because of scarcity, not taste. During the Great Depression, meat was expensive and onions were cheap, so cooks near El Reno, Oklahoma began pressing a heap of thinly sliced onions directly into the raw patty before it hit the flat top. Stretching the beef with onions meant a diner could serve more people with less meat, and the technique stuck around long after the economic reason for it disappeared. Because the onions cook into the meat rather than sitting on top of it, the finished patty gets a lacy, caramelized edge where onion and beef fuse into one crust. Decades later, burger chains rediscovered the method and started offering it as a specialty item, marketing what was once a cost-cutting trick as a premium technique. Smash tacos aren't really about tacos at all. They're a smash burger wearing a tortilla. Nobody can point to one city that invented the format because it seems to have shown up at food trucks across the country around the same time. The method borrows straight from smash burger technique. A ball of beef gets pressed flat on a hot griddle, but instead of a bun, a flour tortilla goes directly on top of the patty while it's still sizzling, soaking up rendered fat before the whole thing gets folded over on itself. That fat-soaked tortilla ends up crisp in some spots and pliable in others, a texture a plain flour tortilla never gets on its own. Under names like smash taco or griddle taco, the format keeps popping up at pop-ups and night markets, spreading almost entirely through word of mouth and video rather than any single restaurant claiming ownership. Detroit pizza owes its shape to car factories, not pizzerias. The deep rectangular pans used to bake it were originally industrial parts trays, repurposed by a Detroit bar sometime around the mid-1900s because they happened to be the right size and durable enough for an oven. Cheese gets pushed all the way to the pan's edges, and as it bakes, it fries against the hot steel walls and turns into a lacy, blackened border that has nothing in common with a soft outer crust. That caramelized rim is the part everyone remembers, dark and slightly bitter against the softer cheese underneath. Food rankings started placing Detroit-style pizza directly against Neapolitan and New York styles, and that comparison alone helped turn a regional bar snack into a nationally recognized category. Chopped cheese still mostly lives in a handful of New York City bodegas, and that scarcity is part of its story. Ground beef gets dropped straight onto the flat top and chopped apart with a spatula as it cooks, mixed in real time with melted cheese, onions, and peppers until nothing is separated anymore, then piled into a hero roll. Nobody agrees on exactly which corner store invented it first, and that unresolved history is part of what keeps the conversation around it alive. When larger chains began releasing similar sandwiches under different names, communities that had eaten chopped cheese for decades pushed back hard, arguing that a dish tied so closely to specific neighborhoods shouldn't be stripped of that context the moment it goes viral. Elote was solving a logistics problem long before anyone filmed it. Eating a plain ear of corn while walking down a street is messy. So vendors in central Mexico began coating cobs in crema, cotija, chili powder, and lime, turning the cream into a kind of glue that keeps everything else stuck in place. The cob gets skewered, sometimes through its own husk, so it can be eaten one-handed without a plate. Regional versions vary in exactly which toppings go on, but the core idea stays consistent. A creamy layer that holds spice and cheese onto a food that would otherwise shed everything by the second bite. Grocery brands now sell Elote-flavored seasoning blends on snack aisles far from where the dish originated. Extending the flavor profile into chips and popcorn, rolled ice cream looks like a recent invention, but the technique predates the platforms that made it famous. Street vendors in Thailand were scraping cold cream mixtures across chilled metal surfaces long before short-form video existed, working the liquid thin with metal spatulas until it firmed up enough to be rolled into tight cylinders. The entire process takes less than 2 minutes from liquid to finished rolls, which made it perfect for filming start to finish without cutting anything out. What changed wasn't the dessert but the audience, since a technique that had existed quietly in Bangkok street stalls suddenly had millions of people watching the same scraping motion play out in real time once video apps picked it up. Nashville hot chicken gets its heat added after frying, which is the opposite of how most spicy fried chicken works. A single Nashville family is generally credited with the dish, and the popular story is that the recipe began as a punishment involving an angry partner and way too much cayenne until the intended victim ended up loving it. A paste built from cayenne, brown sugar, and fat gets brushed onto the chicken right after it comes out of the fryer, so the crust stays crisp while the heat sits on the surface rather than inside the batter. It's traditionally served on plain white bread with pickles, both of which soak up the spiced oil as the plate sits, turning soggy in a way that's somehow part of the appeal rather than a flaw. What started at one restaurant became a category carried by national fried chicken chains within about a decade. Sushi burritos don't exist in Japan because the format was invented specifically for eating on the move in San Francisco. A handful of restaurants in the city built the item around the early 2000s as a lunch option that could be eaten one-handed while walking, essentially a sushi roll scaled up to burrito size. That scale up creates a real engineering problem since a sheet of nori that easily wraps a normal roll tears apart under the weight of a burrito-sized amount of rice and filling. Some versions double the seaweed layer, others swap it for soy paper entirely to avoid the tearing altogether. Once someone started cutting the finished roll in half to show the layered cross-section, that image became the standard way the dish gets presented online more than the eating itself. Smashed cucumber salad relies on breaking the vegetable rather than cutting it, and that difference changes everything about the texture. The technique comes out of Chinese home cooking, especially in Sichuan and northern regions, where the dish is often called pai huang gua. A knife blade or heavy object smashes the cucumber until it splits into jagged, irregular chunks, which are then torn apart further by hand, so no two pieces match. Those rough surfaces hold dressing in a way a clean slice never can, since a smooth-cut edge sheds sauce while a torn one traps it in every crack. Side-by-side demonstrations comparing smashed cucumbers to neatly sliced ones, showing dressing pooling only on the broken pieces, turned a basic side dish into one of the most repeated recipes across food content.